not civil rights, silver rights. You want to know what that motto is? You want to know the individual who lives by it. Hello, everyone. This is Jabari Young, senior editor and writer here at Forbes. And in a minute, I'll be talking to the CEO of Operation Hope. That's right, Mr. John Hope Bryant. And National Black Business Month is in August, so we'll definitely be talking about that. Americans find themselves in $1 trillion worth of credit card debt. What that means, the difference between good and bad credit. He'll break that down. And also a key individual that John Hope Bryant looked up to as he became an entrepreneur and a businessman himself. All that and more with the CEO of Operation Hope, John Hope Bryant. I feel like I know a lot of the conversation because we had it just in Alabama a couple of weeks ago when me and you first got a chance to shake hands. So you had a quote that I kept hearing, and I'm going to start it with this, right? To live in a system of free enterprise and not to understand the rules of free enterprise must be the very definition of slavery. That's a quote by Andrew Young, one of your mentors. And I felt like it was the perfect way to start off this conversation with you because that means a lot to you, Mr. John Hope Bryant.
Well, Gerard, first of all, I want to commend what you have done there and what you guys are doing there at Forbes, because this is a takeoff on what Ambassador Young said, because what he said was at the end of the civil rights movement, what he said was referring to what he and his friend Dr. King were doing when they were attacking war, racism, and poverty. Even the March on Washington was really about money. I'm here to cash a check, mark insufficient or non-sufficient funds. It was a march for jobs and freedom. Economics was all in that, but they were just getting around to the economic conversation when, unfortunately, Dr. King was assassinated. And so Ambassador Young was speaking to what I call a movement from civil rights to now silver rights, from the business, from the streets, the public streets, to hello, what you're doing, the public, to the private suites.
Yeah.
And that's what when I met you, that's why I was so inspired and hopeful, because this would suggest that there is a shift where the new color is green, right? The obsession is not black or white or red or blue, race or politics. It's economic progress for all. And what does that look like? And how do you get there? Because then we've got to decide as a country, are we better together? Which is a question we've been asking and successfully asking as a country, for at least the last 100 years or so.
Yeah.
Just the people that are getting that new progress look a little different than the immigrants and the migrants of the past. But it's the same question. And the reality is there's not enough college-educated white men to grow the economy for the next 30 years. That's not a racial comment. It's not an emotional comment. It's not it's just math.
Yeah.
You need all of us. The economy needs all of us to grow. And I think specifically it needs African Americans to be part of this economic process of uplift. And that's why, again, I think that what Ambassador Young said and what you're doing ties together, because I believe we're sitting right now in a moment in history. This right now is a moment in history. It's just that history does not feel historic when you're sitting in it. It just feels like another day.
Yeah. Third Reconstruction, you said, right?
This is the third Reconstruction. Yes.
Yeah.
From 2020 to 2030. And the first Reconstruction was after Civil War. That's the march toward literally freedom from slavery. The second Reconstruction was the Civil Rights Movement, for which Andrew Young and Dr. King, were paramount, along with, by the way, a lot of bad women, a lot of amazing women, part of that work as well, who don't get the credit they deserve. But that was about access, right? That was cashing the check, getting the job, being able to get to the polling station and the voting booth, access. And now this is about writing the check, not just cashing it.
Yeah.
Right. This is from streets to suites. This is about opportunity for all. This is economic uplift. This is in my opinion, punching the ticket on Wall Street. This is what Reginald Lewis really teed up as the Dr. King of Wall Street. Reginald Lewis, who did that first $1 billion deal in 1985-ish.
Yeah. He graced the Forbes cover. He was on Forbes cover.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So much stuff to talk about, man, and I appreciate the time again. Thank you so much. As we talk about Operation Hope in a minute and the work that you're doing over there, I'm a big fan because financial literacy is at the center of that, and that's something that even I'm still educating myself on because I didn't grow up in a household that mastered that. I grew up in a household that maybe talked about it, but we didn't master it, and so I find myself playing catch up at times. But thankful for brothers like yourself who's able to help me steer that as well as other people. But as we have this conversation, right, we're right in the middle smack of National Black Business Month. When you hear that theme of that month, it's still not a big theme yet, but when you hear it, what comes to mind when somebody says National Black Business Month?
Everything. The Freedmen's Bank of 1865 was chartered to teach freed slaves about money by President Abraham Lincoln. And then went on to be run by a black businessman named Frederick Douglass, who we know to be an abolitionist, and I know to be a businessman who owns $6 million worth of real estate in Baltimore, Maryland, and rented it out to working class blacks, which gave him the financial freedom to be a social justice leader and to pursue civil rights and to run the Freedmen's Bank. Unfortunately, the bank was gamed and destroyed after Lincoln's assassination, but it was located across the street from the White House, showing how strategically important it was, across the street from Treasury and across from the White House. There's a lot of places in Washington to put things. To put it right across from Treasury and the White House is putting a marker down. And that bank, along with 40 acres, January 1865, the mule, February 1865, the bank, March 1865, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, April of 1865, would suggest that there's unfinished work. And to Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? The Light on the Hill is a factory producing entrepreneurs and small business owners in this 21st century, growing this economy that we are uniquely positioned to do because we built this country to start with. Literally, the most valuable asset in this country was us. We built it for free, and so we're not. You're not talking about lazy people here. You're not talking about unequipped people here. I mean, they brought us from Africa because we all halfway around the world because we had a unique talent for that era, which was agricultural genius. We understood how to take dead soil and bring it back to life. And to work in any condition. That helped business. That created business. That created the first millionaire in America who traded cotton out of New York because of what we were doing. We're just on the other end. We're on the wrong end of the transaction, and now we want to make wrong right again. So to me, this is a historical month, a historical moment, and I hope this doesn't come off wrong, but I'm going to say it anyway. We really need now just a what I call a Black Jewish business plan. And what I mean by that is my Jewish brothers and sisters were targeted for assassination, specifically in World War II. But because they had the 5 pillars of success before that and the 5 pillars after that, as much education shoved down your throat, understanding the math, what we're talking about here, how capitalism works, business works, wealth creation works, family structure and resiliency, self-esteem and confidence, role models and environment, and the right kind of role models. They punch right through that adversary and stabilize on the other side. What would happen if we'd had those tools? Because they were denied from us. How would that be beneficial to the nation? And I think the answer to that is all lights come on when you do that. Everybody wins when we prosper. So the story that has not been told. Sorry, the lesson that was never taught, and as a result of that, the road that was never rode on, is this Black business creation at scale lesson. Because most of our businesses, as you know, are self-employment projects. Most of them are single. They're solopreneurs, if you want to call it that. That's even probably a compliment. So what would happen if you had businesses that employed? I employed 450 people.
Yeah.
What would happen if there was a bunch of me running around?
Yeah.
What would that do to community? What would that do to that network? What would that do to vendor contracts and things
Well,
like that.
according to the Brookings
So
Institute, it'll take up a community, right? Because 2%, I believe, that they reported out that are only black employer businesses, and that's a problem because if you have more black employer businesses, it brings prosperity to entire neighborhoods.
this is a radical movement of common sense.
Yeah.
That's what this conversation is. This is a
Yeah.
radical movement of common sense. This is just look. We're a 1.4, $1.5 trillion consumer spending force. That's nice, but that's not that dog don't hunt. That's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Like what we need is wealth creation. There's a difference, as you know, Jari. There's a difference between making money and building wealth.
Yeah.
You make money during the day. You build wealth in your sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
That means I need to get some more sleep. That's what I do. I need to get some more rest.
well, that's where compounding is, man. That's look. The only problem with this conversation is that it has a beginning and an end because it needs to go on forever. This is the memo that we all need to get. What's the entertainment business? It's a business. What's the sports business? It's a business. So we're obsessing on these two areas as an example, but what we forgot is that it's a sports business. It's the entertainment business. It's a business of. To quote my friend Quincy Jones, if you think you're in the music business and you don't own licensing rights, publishing rights, writing rights, some kind of rights, you're actually not in the music business. You're just a temporary performer.
Yeah.
Drop the mic.
Drop the mic.
So what would happen if all of us would create an LLC, a business, we buy a home, rehab it, and live in it, use equity, buy 2 more homes over time, rehab it, and rent it. Boom.
Yeah.
Think what that does to tax base in the neighborhood. Think about what that does to your own net worth. Now you're going from not just making money to building wealth, generational wealth. Think about what that does to neighborhood revitalization and stabilization and jobs. Because now I can hire a plumber, a heater, somebody who's a heating technician, landscapers, roofers, painters, which is what I do, by the way, through my Promise Homes company, a few $1 million every year in contracts to minority vendors. But what would happen if we all became a minority vendor purveyor? I mean, the ripple effects here, or just from that one little act, which is business, would be extraordinary. And 41% of us own a home compared to 75% of our white counterparts. That delta of 30% is hurtful to the nation and hurtful to us. The easiest way to build wealth is, as example, owning a home for yourself, a home to rent. We have an affordable housing crisis in America. So how do you take what Forbes does? This is what business people do. You find a problem, and you find a solution to that problem. That's called business or entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
We need that at scale. So you had me at hello.
Well, listen, you had me at hello, man, and thanks again to all the work that y'all doing at Operation Hope. But listen, I could talk to you forever, limited time, but write fast, because when I'm sure people hear this and you're spitting a lot of history, facts, data-driven things, but where did it all start for John Hope Bryant, right? You grew up in L.A., in South Central, the Rodney King, incident that happened in the 90s. I know that had a big impact on you. When you were 10 years old, right? You went out and you opened up a candy store to right next to the rival liquor store. And so when I saw that story, I was instantly impressed because I had a liquor store that was right around the corner from my house, and I hated it. I wanted to get shut down because of all the negativity that it brought to the community. But at the same time, man, where did it all start for you in South Central? Like, where did this financial literacy, the business side, where did it spark?
Like a lot of us, it started in pain.
Yeah.
My mom and dad came from the South. We don't have time for this conversation, but for context, for people who might believe that somehow I had a silver spoon with that in my mouth. My mother's mother was a slave. My father's father was a sharecropper. And so they came with a high school education to South Central LA. They hustled and built pretty quickly a little mini conglomerate. We owned a home. We owned an 8-unit apartment building we bought for $18,000 in South Central LA, $247 a month payment on that 8-unit apartment building, which is worth $6 million today, by the way. Last time I checked. We owned a gas station. We owned a cement contracting business. Anyway, we lost it all. Lost everything because my dad could make it but couldn't keep it. And he wouldn't ask my mother for help, and she was a brilliant saver. They weren't working together. They didn't realize they were better together. And so we made it, again, making money, building wealth, two different things. So that's where that thought came from. For the first message, we lost that. Then I saw, the guy who saved my life lose his life when I was 7 years old. And I'm just giving you the short version so we can get a lot of in this the time we have. But when I was 7 years old, the guy who kept me from swallowing my tongue and choking to death on his porch, I saw him murdered because he was trying to make some extra money to take care of us. We were living with him after my mom and dad divorced, because my mother was trying to save some money for a down payment for a home. She was living with her girlfriend. This guy, OC, was murdered selling drugs around the corner to make some extra money. Didn't realize that those guys around the corner took that seriously, and they murdered him in front of me. I'm 7 years old. And then I'm 9. My best friend gets murdered. George, who was really smart, hanging around with the wrong guy, hanging around with the next door neighbor in Compton, where my mother finally bought that home in Compton, that first home. She bought and sold 7, but that was the first one. And I wanted to be like George. This guy was really smart, man. And but George didn't know who he wanted to be like. He didn't have good role models like you and I had. And so he was murdered. And that was about money, because he was hanging around the drug dealer in the neighborhood who thought he was cool. Neighborhood, ghetto famous, as we called it. So by the time I was 9 years old, I had all this pain that had accumulated in my body and my psyche. And the theme song of all of it, man, was money and financial literacy, short-termism, in other words, making short-term decisions and replacing it for a long-term business plan. And just getting played by a system we didn't understand.
Yeah.
But these were not dumb people, and they were not bad people. So a banker came in my classroom when I was 9 years old in Compton, California. Happened to be white, 6'2", red tie, white shirt, blue suit. Start talking about money, start rapping about money. And he'd come once a week for 6 weeks. By the second or third week, we had a little bit of a relationship with him. And I raised my hand. Excuse me, sir. What do you do for a living, and how'd you get rich legally? I was dead serious, man. And he said, well, young man, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. I said, sir, I don't know what an entrepreneur is, but if it's legal and you're financing him, I'm going to be one. And the larger context of that, by the way, was that's really Operation Hope today. The larger story was, I said to him by the way, I used to the next week I came to school with this 3-piece crushed velvet suit on that my mother made for me because I wanted to dress like the banker. I wanted to role model him, but I didn't have a suit other than my Sunday suit that my mother made for me. And it was really a horrible suit. It was crushed velvet, purple, and I got beat up. I got beat up at school. But that's how powerful this image was, right? So I asked this guy, excuse me, how many bankers are there in America? He said, I don't know, there's 300,000 in Bank of America. There's 10,000 banks in the country. So it's got to be millions of bankers. Yeah, probably millions of bankers. And your job is to loan people like me money if we can qualify? Yeah, that's your job. And I don't get murdered if I don't pay the money back. No, you don't get murdered. We just issue you a notice of default. And worst case scenario, you file bankruptcy and start over. Huh? That's how the rest of the world works? Why don't we understand this lesson? Man, that was it. When I understood that, I knew my mission for my whole life. That was my calling. And if you look at what Operation Hope is today, and what I call financial literacy, the civil rights issue of this generation, because when you know better, you do better. That's it at scale. Half of us have a credit score, meaning African Americans, have a credit score below 620. Now let that sink in for a minute.
Yeah.
That means when you wake up in the morning, we got a lot of problems. Police brutality, racism, discrimination, all kind of issues, right? But when your credit score is below 620, 580 as an example, you're locked out of the free enterprise system, man. You can't get a decent car loan at 610. You can't get a mortgage below 680, not a good one.
Yeah.
You can't get a small business loan, so you can be featured in Forbes below 700 because it's risky credit. Which means that we don't even realize what we don't know that we don't know the feeling is what we think we know. And in a blind town, a one-eyed man's king. If you don't know better, you don't do better. It's that old Southern saying, no matter how much I love you, my son or my daughter, if I don't have wisdom, I can only give you my own. So out of love, we pass down bad habits from generation to generation. It's not like somebody taught us this memo and we screwed it up. What became obvious to me in that little classroom at 10 years old, 9 years old, before I started my first business you talked about, was that no one ever gave us a memo, man.
Yeah.
That's the light that came on in my head. The work of the Freedmen's Bank was never completed. No one ever gave us this memo. So, as you know, I went and helped got the federal government to rename the Treasury Annex building to the Freedmen's Bank building, um, in honor of all of us. We have offices, 250 offices around this country, that not just serving black and brown people, but also poor whites. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
probably have 20% of my offices are in the deep South serving poor whites, because more poor whites than poor anybody else. We need all of us to come up from nothing. We serve the Latino population, that Spanish speaking coaches. That all of us need to contribute to this new American tapestry and story. And we've got a super focus on African American uplift through the 1 Million Black Business Initiative, where we already created, nurtured, supported 330,000 Black businesses. And there's only 3.1 million in the country of Black businesses. That's 10% just since October 2020 when we started this. So we are on fire and we're serious about this. But it all started
In that
in
classroom.
Compton, in that classroom.
Yeah, man. You talked about it just now, so let's just jump right into it. The 1 million black businesses, right? That's a $130 million initiative with Shopify, right? It's a 10-year
Yep.
initiative, so still early in the process. And you just mentioned you created already 300,000. Anything else that you can provide to kind of show where that initiative stands at the present time?
Oh my man, it's first of all, don't be afraid to ask. I take no for vitamins. Like anybody watching this, like success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. By the way, what would have happened if you didn't ask my name or I didn't ask yours? What would have happened if we, it didn't, introduce each other to each other in Birmingham? What would have happened if you didn't follow up or
I
I
was a
didn't
month
follow
late
up?
though. I was a month late though, John, because I told you I saw you in Washington D.C. at the Waldorf Astoria, and I wanted to go over then, but I said he looks so much busy. I don't want to. And then you show up in Alabama. I said, you know what? I'm not letting this opportunity pass again. I got to say hello to him, and this is where the conversation sparked. So you're absolutely right about that.
Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous.
Yeah.
That's an Andrew Young quote as well. We got to step into our mandate, right? And again, what's the worst thing that happen to you? Somebody's gonna tell you no, or I'm sorry, I'm busy right now, whatever. And by the way, I would have loved to met you at any time, any place. I'm so proud, as I said earlier, of you and what you've done. And by the way, when you sent me a note, you notice I said yes to whatever it is you asked me. It wasn't even a question, because I'm just, I think that you're part of this historic moment. To your question though, about the 1 Million Black Business Initiative and why I think you got to be bold and ask what you want. I did a podcast after George Floyd's murder with the founder of Shopify, who's a friend of mine. His name is Toby, and richest man in Canada at one point. He said, "What can I do to help, John?" He was just moved by what happened with George Floyd, and I thought about it for a second. I said, "I don't know, help me create a million new black businesses."
Mm.
And he said, now I could have said, help me with a contract, or I don't know, help my cousin Pookie and them, and I could have said been selfish or small-minded or whatever. But again, you're gonna fail big. You're gonna succeed big, and do for others. Don't just do for yourself. Live for something larger than yourself. So I asked this bold, audacious question, and he said, send me something on it. So I wrote a little deck. By the way, people watching this, don't let the perfect become the death of the good. Do something. You can always make it better later, but don't wait. If you wait for the perfect, the moment will leave you by the roadside. So I wrote something up quickly, sent it to him that same week, so he didn't forget about it because he's busy. And I heard nothing. So I wrote him a note about a week later, said, "Well, I just assumed that this didn't work for you, but thanks for your consideration. You're a good guy, Toby. Much love, much respect. See you later." And he wrote back and says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Yes." And I went to my spam folder. And a $130 million commitment was sitting in my spam folder. You always check your spam folder.
Yeah. That's the kicker, right?
That's the kicker, right? So after that, we moved on it and we announced it at our Hope Global Forum, and I think it was 2020. And we've been kicking it ever since. So this is a free license for 4 months from Shopify. This is a free domain name, free website, free business plan through Operation Hope, free 700 credit score counseling training, because most people who are business owners or an entrepreneur, and as you know, those two things are different. Start with their personal credit, um, free business training, and then free payment systems and delivery support systems through Shopify. So platforming you. And then once you make your first sale, Shopify even offers you a credit line against your second sale. And then we then got through a time bank commitment, got accountants and lawyers and bankers and business people and marketers to agree to give time commitments of 2 hours to help sort of marshal you through the infrastructure development for your business. So it's a whole laddering effect. And now we're adding financing structures on the back end, lines of credit and things like that. So 330,000 plus Black businesses thus far, lots of success stories. And this is not just, sophisticated e-commerce, whatever, blah, 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 or even new businesses. Think about the barbershop. And, you and I are flying in someplace and it's midnight. And we got an appointment the next morning at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And we need an early morning cut. So, the old way is you get the phone, you call a barbershop before you get on the plane, and the city you're going to, and they go, yo, man, I'm cutting the hair right now. I'm going to get back to you. Give me a number or call me back. He forgets, whatever. You got to go to the airport. That's a missed sale. And that's old school. What happens now is because of us and what we're doing now, if you have a barbershop, now you should have an e-barbershop, okay? And now you have a scheduling app. So now I go on your website. I go to the internet on the plane, Wi-Fi. I search Black barbershops in, New York, wherever I'm going. 4 names come up. I go to the website for the one who's got a website. And then I schedule. I need a barbershop. I need a barber cut at 8 in the morning. And I put my credit card in. So if I cancel, barber gets paid. And while I'm on the site, so let me buy a hair scarf. Let me buy a brush. So by the time that that business owner wakes up in the morning, they've made money in their sleep.
Yeah.
They've
growing wealth.
And whether hello.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing at scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, listen, when you talk about again, it was the 10 years initially, you're at $300,000 plus jobs or Black businesses you've built now. Will you reach 1 million before the 10 years, you think?
It appears that we're ahead of schedule. 330 million Black businesses. This is, this is 2020, 2023 going into the fourth quarter. My guess is that we're going to exceed the 1 million Black business mark, certainly by 2030. And I think we'll get there well before that, because I didn't think we'd have this kind of momentum until about 2026. I really thought it was going to take a while to ramp up. So we by the way, you probably know this, maybe the audience doesn't, but I know how sharp you are, you know this. Coming out of the pandemic, the largest group creating businesses in America were African Americans.
African Americans, yes.
And the largest group of all groups started creating business in America were Black women. Boom.
Yeah.
So once again, this perception that we're, not interested or not, whatever the excuse is, it's just not true. We just need a shot. We just need somebody to give us a shot. We've been doing so much with so little for so long. We can almost do anything with nothing. And that Citigroup report that you mentioned is telling that also this is not just about social justice or doing the right thing. This is also about GDP for the country.
Yeah. 16 trillion, you can't lose that. That's money that you're missing because you have an attitude against a group that knows how to do anything, as you said, with basically nothing. We can create it. John, I could talk to you, man, for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, man, and be educated. But unfortunately, people's their attention span, they don't have that long. And I know I don't want to keep you as well, man. So I'm going to end it a few rapid questions before I get you out of here. The first one is the headline that even took my interest was the 1 trillion in credit card debt. I know you have put out a video on Instagram kind of talking about it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, particularly from the standpoint of the Black community when you hear that number, 1 trillion in credit card debt for Americans?
When mainstream America has a headache, Black and brown folks have pneumonia.
Yeah.
We're all sick. What that said to me is, a lot of us confuse cash with credit. We think the credit cards are cash. They're not. You got to pay that back. And then you have charge cards, which is a whole nother situation that has to be paid, within 30 days. So all credit it comes from the Latin word credito. credibility. So credit is a form of credibility. When you have credibility, somebody says, hey, versus paying me now, pay me later, you can use this to charge it for now and pay me later. But what's happened is that when you're financially illiterate, you replace, well, I'll pay it later with what's the payment. So versus asking things like what's the interest rate, when you're financially illiterate or you haven't been trained in financial stewardship, you then ask questions like when you're going to buy a car, when you're going to, whatever, hey, it's some important thing, going to buy a house, what's the payment? And you never ask what the payment is when there's an interest rate attached. If I take a $10,000 credit card, if I buy a $10,000 car with a credit card with a 14% interest rate on it, I will pay for that car 2 or 3 times over in the course of a decade, 2.5 times. Yeah. So credit cards, we focus on this, and I know that it used to be me growing up, that I'd send that $25 payment in and hope that it made it to the credit card company before that I paid that bill for the date I was on, where the bill was $20, and I was hoping that my credit was open. But we've got to understand there's good debt and there's bad debt, and we have to understand that financing a mortgage is, generally speaking, good debt. It's something that will appreciate. But financing jewelry with a credit card is probably bad debt. It will depreciate. Anything that depreciates is bad debt. So now, financing your college education, I actually think, oddly enough, that's good debt, because you're going to make millions in income over time with a college education. You'll make hundreds of thousands, or much less, shall I say, without a college education, depending on the length of your,
And as you say, you build those relationships in that classroom, right? Because that's where the relationship building goes, and that relationship equity in this world, as you know, it ain't what you know sometimes, it's who you know. And so that relationship equity is big.
What we met through relationship capital.
Absolutely.
We met through relationship capital,
Absolutely.
Right? And that's the way the work. And if you hang around 9 broke people, you'll be the 10th. The opposite is also true. Why does somebody go to Harvard? Harvard's a decent school. I mean, a good school. Sorry, I've got a little certificate degree from there. Blah blah blah. But nobody goes to Harvard because it's 10 times better than your state university. You go to Harvard because the class of 2023 is going to hook each other up for the next 40 years. Mm-hmm. It's wealthy folks hooking each other up. That's why you go to a country club. That's why you're a member of any club or fraternity or sorority. It's a club. It's an association. So you want to make sure you're a member of the right club. With credit cards, it is a signal, to me, is a signal that we are living beyond our means. So I'm answering your question earlier. When your outflow exceeds your inflow, then your overhead will be your downfall. And most folks have got too much month at the end of their money. And the pandemic put some false sense that people were rolling. They were wealthy. We don't have time for this conversation in this interview. Maybe we'll do another one, but I can break down the whole situation with the pandemic and why assets went up. And it was false. That's why they're coming down now. But it was a lot of stimulus from the federal government giving us a sense that we were doing better than we were. And asset values were bubbles all over the place. They're now trying to raise interest rates to bring that down without fracturing the economy. But, we got those stimulus checks or whatever, or benefited from the largesse that was going on. And people thought, oh, I'm rolling. And now that that's sort of tapering off, people want the same lifestyle, but with less real income, and they're compensating that. My fears are compensating that with credit cards. Yeah. And so that story is going to end badly unless we do a reset, restructure our finances, create a budget, go to our Hope Inside coaches. We are lowering debt $3,800 for the average person, increasing savings $1,500, increasing your credit score 54 points for somebody making $48,000 a year. Fundamentally changes your life. So the story does not have to end badly, but you got to do something to make sure that you take control of your life.
Yeah, most definitely. 2 more rapid things, man. I'm going to get you out of here. The third is, again, at Forbes BLK, we're building something special. And I always go to the community and I always say, hey, listen, I got this person coming up. What would you like to ask? And one of the key things that they always want to know, the particular community wants to know, is about someone you looked up to in the black community, and it doesn't have to be famous. And I know Andrew Young is the guy, so I want you to not pick him, right? And I know I heard you say somebody else who I gladly admire. Is it that particular individual?
Well, it was individuals, but I mean Quincy Jones,
Quincy,
Reginald Lewis, Quincy. When I was coming up, man, I wanted to be an international businessman who happened to be black. And the only 2 people I knew who were international growing up who were black were Quincy Jones and Andrew Young.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. And neither one of them were business people, oddly enough. I mean, not in the traditional sense of the word. And Reginald Lewis, unfortunately, had passed on to glory. Um, so, those are some names that jump out at me. I mean, Frederick Douglass, bad brother.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I admired both Dr. King and Malcolm X.
Yeah.
I think you need sort of almost a composite of that philosophy
You need a little
today.
bit of both. You need a little bit of both.
That's it. That's
You
it.
need a
I
little
mean,
bit of both. Yeah.
when Malcolm said, "We've been bamboozled, we've been tricked, we've been fooled," right?
Yeah.
And at the end of his life, he had come around to more of a Martin's view, and Martin had actually sort of come around to a little bit of Malcolm's view. And I think that they were both alive, and they'd be friends. I think that we need a radical movement of common sense, and anybody who works from the neck up, who thinks himself out of a problem versus trying to fight themselves out of a problem, is got my vote. Is my kind of hero and shero. I think there's a lot of folks making smart sexy today who look like us. We've been making dumb sexy for way too long. We're
Yeah.
dumbed down and celebrate. Look, Jay-Z, that 444 album was financial literacy.
That's
A
all.
financial literacy album.
Yeah. I tell people Rick Ross talk financial literacy all the time, right? If you listen to his words, Rick Ross drop a lot of jewels. And listen, he certainly motivated me a few times, right? So, but my very last one, John. Charlemagne the God, absolutely.
Killer Mike.
Right? Yeah.
Killer Mike.
John Hope
Yeah.
Bryant, right? Let's not give you your flowers as well, man. Give you your flowers as well. But last thing for me, again, in spirit of National Black Business Month, and again, John Hope Bryant, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it. One critical piece of advice that you would tell aspiring entrepreneurs, and I know, listen, you got a lot of content on your Instagram, John, so I want you to dig deep and say something that you haven't said in a very long time or maybe ever about the advice that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur if they were in front of your face right now, and they always are.
Walk through life consciously oblivious of most things around you because it just doesn't matter. It don't matter. They don't matter. Stop using money you don't have to buy things you don't need, to impress people you don't know, in places that you don't live, about stuff that really don't matter.
Yeah.
Stop wasting your time. Stop letting people waste your time. You cannot get your time back. Be generous with other things, money even. Be generous with it, but be ruthless about your own personal time, because we are 45 minutes older even after this interview. What did you do with your time? How did you invest it? And with whom? And when you're with somebody, make sure you're better together. If you're in a relationship, 2 + 2 should equal more than 4. It should equal 6, 8, or 10. Or what are you doing? You do bad all by yourself. As Quincy Jones again would say, the only thing worse than being alone is wishing that you were. So you want to walk through life consciously oblivious of most things around you. Stay focused on your objective, your goal. People would laugh at me, man. They laughed at me coming up. Oh, financial literacy. Oh,
Yeah.
capitalism. Oh, here he comes again. Right. They're not laughing anymore. They're
No.
asking me for a job.
Yeah.
Right. So they're asking me for a hookup. So I just, if you go far in the North Pole, you end up south. Lock into your goal. Do not get deferred, distracted. Don't allow yourself to be dismissed. Be your own self-improvement project. Understand that God is your core and key champion. You're God's child. He made you special and unique. And now you just got to go and find that uniqueness. But you can't do it in a crowded room with people all in your ear all the time. There's no space for you. Quiet yourself and focus yourself on a problem that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and own the solution to that problem. And that's called a niche. Find your niche.
John Hope Bryant, I appreciate the time, not only today, but at our Forbes BOK Summit. I know you'll be a part of that. I can't wait to have that conversation around wealth, growing wealth. And I think a lot of it you just dropped here, but we'll get into it more in November. And I appreciate even being talked about in your global forum that you're having this year in December as well. And I look forward to attending that. That's going to be an honor for me. I appreciate the time, John Hope Bryant. Look forward to doing this again and again and again and continuing to talk until it's instilled and we talk more about how to grow black businesses instead of establish them. Thank you so much for the time.
My pleasure. And I want to say this one last thing before we go.
Yeah.
Your mom and dad, or somebody in your family did you right because they told you they loved you. I don't even need to answer that question. I know the answer. And the second piece of advice I want to say to people is become reasonably comfortable in your own skin.
Yes.
No one's comfortable in their own skin. That's a lie. we're all insecure a little bit. We're all uncomfortable a little bit. And that's okay because that keeps you driving forward and striving, right? That's why we go and buy nice things and buy nice cars. It is achieving, yes, but it's also a little insecurity. We're trying to prove something to ourselves and to others. We're trying to show others that we've made it. It's okay, but just become reasonably comfortable in your own skin. Because if I don't like me, I'm not going to like you. If I don't love me, I don't have a clue how to love you. So become that thing that I see in your eyes. Become someone who's self-loved. And if you and make sure that if you have a child, you tell them you love them because that is what made the difference in your and my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to go home and tell my 9-year-old dad right now. Thank you.
Good.
John Hope Bryant, we will talk again, my brother. Thank you.
Love and light.